Definitely a trying time in my family, definitely my immediate family. You know, we did find ourselves homeless. And, you know, it was a time where my mom was going through a lot of abuse from my father. You know, the domestic violence were in our household was, was pretty deep. We sought out help. You know, we had left the home actually to try to stay with a family member, so he couldn't find us. And he ended up finding us, busting the house one day, and he ended up roughing up my mom. You know, she came out, she had all kind of, her clothes was ripped off, scars and stuff like that. So it was definitely a trying time for us. Wherever we went, we felt like he would follow us, or he would find us. So, you know, we went to a shelter. And so we were homeless for a little bit. We stayed in the shelter for about 30 days. And, you know, we didn't really have anywhere to go, but she still had to go to work. You know, she still had to go to work. So, you know, during the day while she was at work, you know, they had people to watch the kids. So they watched us. Eventually my dad turned himself in to the authorities, which is why we were able to, you know, move out and try to find somewhere else to live. And, you know, it was definitely a trying time because, you know, I seen everything my mom was going through after getting, abused and things like that. And then, you know, my grandfather, he wasn't happy. And, you know, we just had to protect ourselves. You know, she had to protect us and she had to protect herself. So that's definitely why we went to a shelter, and it definitely helped us out.
Brandon Marshall, Denver Bronco, formerly homeless. Homelessness can happen to anyone. Nobody is immune. Today, when we leave the DAC, you may pass by Civic Park and see many men, women, or even children sleeping on the ground. You might drive down Colfax and see a variety of individuals waving handmade signs at stoplight intersections. You might walk down the 16th Street Mall and be asked to give some change. Today, as a fellow Rotarian, I ask you for some change. For some, I'm going to ask for you to change your mind. For others, I'm going to ask for you to change your perspective. And even more for all, I'm going to ask for you to change your heart and give it permission to grow in its capacity to build goodwill and better friendships among those who are housed and those who are unhoused. We as Rotarians are supposed to ask the primary question, is it the truth? The truth is that 51% of those experiencing homelessness in the Metro Denver area are families with children. The truth is that there's been a 307% increase in school-age children experiencing homelessness over the last 9 years. The truth is the cost of homelessness is $43,240 as opposed to the cost of housing an individual, which is $11,694. The truth is that the overwhelming majority of those who are known to be homeless in Colorado are an invisible population, sleeping on couches, in cars, or doubled up with their friends and family. The truth is that experiencing homelessness can happen to anyone, and most people in Denver experience homelessness as a result of job loss, death or divorce in their immediate family, or illness. The Close to Home campaign is a grassroots public will-building initiative to raise awareness, increase understanding, and move Coloradans to speak up and take meaningful actions that make a difference in the lives of those experiencing homelessness. Dear Rotarians, won't you spare some change? Please welcome our first speaker. Leanne Wheeler could not join us today. She's fallen ill. And just a few hours ago, we had Mr. William Panamaroff, who has volunteered to speak with us today. Please welcome William. Thank you.
Hello, my name is William Panamaroff, and you just call me Panama. I spent Army ROTC in high school. I'm sorry. All right. Right after high school, I joined the Army. I served two tours overseas and one combat run. After that, I joined the National Guard. I was a combat engineer and a combat lifesaver. From then, I took a break from the military to raise my 3 kids. And then I returned to the National Guard for 5 more years, attaining the rank of E5. At that time, I owned a home. I had 3 cars and mineral rights to my own land. I had a wonderful job, but I had an issue with domestic violence. I was a victim. After that, there was a divorce, and I was relieved of my duty in the military. I couch surfed. I followed job to job, from state to state. Eventually landing here in Denver, where I had a good job, but due to family issues, I became homeless. I found Comitas by accident through a veterans group. They recommended me to stay there for a while. I spent most of my nights in the single shelter, and I volunteered to do maintenance and help around the building. Eventually, I was approached by the director of operations, and I became a full-time employee. And today, I'm going to be buying my own truck. And with my excellent credit, I'm planning on purchasing my own home again with a VA loan and making Denver my home. I was raised to work hard, and I never thought that I would be homeless. But divorce changed all that. I'm proud to say that I now work full-time for the company that helped me, and I thank you all for your time.
Hello. Thank you all for your time here today to listen to our stories. My name is Tiffany Christian, and when I was asked to share with you all some of my story, I really didn't know where to start because my story encompasses my entire 35 years of my life thus far. And keeping in consideration of time, I didn't think that it would be appropriate to start with the year of 1980 and move forward. So I just decided to give you guys just a synopsis of my journey. I was born in Denver to a typical little to middle class family. I have 6 siblings, and we are a blended family. Meaning that we all have different moms and dads. So because of this, it caused a lot of instability. We moved around a lot, and I went from my grandmother's house to my mom's house to my biological father's house. Then when my mom got remarried, I moved over there to my mom and stepfather's house. And throughout these different instabilities, I saw a lot of anger and addictions and abuse, and it directly affected me. And at age 13, I decided to take charge of my own life, and I didn't want to be at home, and that was my decision. I wanted to run away and stay anywhere else but any of those homes that I had. I would have rather stayed on the streets, and I always struggle with mentioning the specifics of my upbringing because I feel like I've always made my own decisions, and I never wanted to blame anybody for my choices that I made growing up. However, recently I've realized that there is a direct connection because my upbringing made it difficult to transition into being a fully functioning adult. So with that being said, I want to take you back to when I was a teenager, and this area over here at the 16th Street Mall I became very familiar with. It became my home, and it was where I stayed. a lot of the times because it was 24-hour access, buses and a shelter and the bus that goes down the mall. And there was a day place called The Spot, and it was a place for the youth to hang out, and it was safe. They provided activities and food for the young people. I slept on buses. I slept in restaurants, the bathrooms of different restaurants that were open 24 hours. And I was in several shelters to where by the time I was 15, I was in close to 17 different group homes and shelters, and one of them I was in 13 different times. Looking back, I don't believe that the homes, like my grandmother, my mother, and my stepfather, I don't believe that it was all that bad to live there, but I know that it was unhealthy. And I think that I just didn't learn the tools to cope with the situation. And although the situations were hard, I didn't know how to get through them, and I didn't know how to deal with it. So leaving all these situations was a lot easier for me than to stay and deal with it all. This type of behavior followed into my adult years, and it made it hard to become a responsible adult and eventually a mother. I didn't know how to pay bills as an adult. I found it hard to get an apartment, to save money, or even get a driver's license. I didn't know how to get a driver's license. I didn't understand the value of having a good credit score, and I didn't see how important having a clean criminal record was until I kept getting denied jobs. I couldn't get a loan for a dependable car, and I couldn't get an apartment in a safe area. I guess after this kind of cycle, I really felt powerless, and I felt hopeless. And even though I wanted to change, it was so overwhelming that I really did not know where to start. As I got older, I met friends who had those things that I was denied, and it inspired me. And it inspired me, and it gave me a hunger to change and to make some different decisions. And eventually, although I had that hunger and that desire, I had hit rock bottom, at least what I thought was rock bottom at that time. And now looking back, I think that it was actually the beginning of change. I too stayed at the Comitis Crisis Center several times, but the most recent time was in my mid-20s, and what I gained there was the structure and the rules that I had never had growing up. My life didn't turn around right away, but it was a start that I needed. And so 7 years ago, I had no job, I had no references, I had no car, no savings, no idea how to do any of those things. I had no higher education, and I had a credit score in the 300s, and for those of you who are business people, you know how horrible that is. But lastly, I didn't have a sense of future because I didn't have a safe place that I could call home. As of today, I'm 35. This is 7 years later, and I'm still in this process of making my life better. However, just recently, I paid off my first car. I had to go with one of those car companies that lend to risky borrowers, and so I pretty much paid double for my car, but it was worth it because I needed to improve my credit, and I never owned anything in my life, so I wanted to know what that felt like, and so I stuck through it. It's been a sacrifice, but stuck through that. My credit score is now close to 700. Yes. I recently, just last year, graduated from Community College of Aurora with an associate's degree with a 4.0 GPA. Thank you. Recently, I just transferred and I've been accepted into the University of Denver, and I currently just finished my first quarter last week, and I now have a 3.5 GPA, and I'm the first in my family to go to college. I've been employed with the same employer now. Oh, thank you. I've been employed with the same employer now for 2 years. I have some savings, and I've learned how to save, but that's kind of hard when you're a single parent going to school. But my daughter, she is a teenager. She has a 3.7 GPA in high school. She's happy, she's healthy, and she doesn't have the life that I lived when she's now 15, and she doesn't have the life that I lived when I was 15. I still don't own a home, but I have made some amazing changes by the grace of God. And I'm making the sacrifices to change all of those cycles that I had growing up, because I don't want that for her. Looking back on it, I realized that I wasn't the stereotypical homeless family. I needed to just learn those coping skills. I needed to learn life skills. And again, looking back, I think that it could definitely happen to anybody. I didn't choose, although I didn't want to be at home, I didn't choose that path because I didn't understand the consequences that were going to come to it. Rather, I didn't have a safe place. And now, I mean, it feels great just to be able to go home, I have my own keys, and I'm responsible, and sounds a little weird, but as an adult, that's what we should be doing, right? But if you don't have somebody to teach you those things, you can't do what you don't know. Well, I just want to say thank you, everyone, for listening to our stories. Thank you so much for coming here today. Have a great evening.
Wow. Wow. I am just blown away, Tiffany. Thank you. Thank you for sharing with us, really. Because sometimes I think when we start thinking about homelessness and what it means to people, we forget that we are her. We are that person. I'm Marsha Brown, and I'm a previously homeless parent. Tiffany, I am inspired by you because you really just said, hey, I'm me. And I think it says a lot. It takes a lot of courage to say, this is what happened, and look at me now. So my story is kind of different. You know, I'm kind of 35, but I claim 27 and a half. Just to top her story. But really, as I think about homelessness, what it really means to be homeless, what do you do? What do you do when you're homeless? Like, if we stop for a minute, my whole life, I had parents, of course. I'm here. I've got siblings. I was the baby, so of course I'm a little, not really spoiled, but really a little spoiled. But we grew up like most American people, like people in general, right? You don't grow up thinking, oh, how to prepare yourself for homelessness. What do you do if you become homeless? No, typically my parents were, I think like everybody else, they worked, they taught me to fight for what you believe in. Do the hard work, and it'll pay off. So I did. Very, very adamant about working to make sure you're putting in your time. As I went on this journey as a single parent, my kids now are adults, and I have a son and a daughter. One is 25 and one is 20. And so as I was growing up, I thought, okay, school, I'm going to be the best I could be. I'm going to do everything in school. And I taught my kids to do the same. Live to be in school, right? You make sure you're part of all the programs, and you take advantage of everything that you can. not thinking that one day you could be homeless. How important is that? Who thinks about that? So for me, it was put the work in, it'll pay off. I worked as a single parent. I worked for one of the credit bureaus, and they closed my business. They closed the office down in Detroit, and I said, hey, I love Colorado. I'm going to go on vacation. I'll take my kids on vacation, and we'll, start living the dream. I worked and put the work in. I stayed the path. But what do you do when you're homeless? Where do homeless people go? I never thought about that. Where do you go? You walk along the street? Nobody's missing you, by the way. No one is expecting you to be anywhere. That thought was devastating to me. Like, wait a minute, I go to work every day, we pack our lunch. I pack a lunch now because I'm more efficient. But you pack your lunch, you go, you pride yourself on being on time or being early or staying late. So I got here, I'm in Denver, love this place, love it. My kids is doing well, they're graduating, they're active, they're healthy. I decided to start working and build a nonprofit. Went great. We were feeding about 3,000 people through the Food Bank of the Rockies. I felt accomplished. So accomplished, I started my own business. Yes, we could take this on from one community. We could spread this around the state, right? Because I've got something to give. And then I get that phone call where this young man, my son, my only son, was hit by a drunk driver. That phone call changed my life. Working no longer mattered. I was just glad to see that he was alive, because the young lady he was in the car with did not make it. The driver was going over 100 miles an hour. T-boned the car. They cut him out of the roof. And after he got to the hospital, they called me. My knees buckled. Who wants to get that phone call? We don't think about that phone call in the middle of the night. That phone call changed my life. I'm not even sure how I made it to the hospital. He had severe nerve and muscle damage. This was someone that's very active, right? Living that young life, and you love to see your kids living it. I closed my business. I shut every door and became a full-time caregiver, and would do it again, as you would as parents, right? I knew I had tucked away a couple of dollars. How many days should it rain? Remember they asked you to tuck away money for that rainy day, right? You say, well, okay, 30 days of rain should do it, right? 6 months later, I had exhausted my entire savings, and we were looking at eviction. I called Warren Village. It's a transitional shelter. I didn't know about the program. I just knew that's where you could go if you needed help. And I had to ask myself, I'm getting ready to be evicted. I've got this young man that could barely walk. I've got a teenager that's in high school. What do you do when you're homeless? You reach out. Do I deserve a safe place? Of course. We all do. I got the phone call back after I applied for Warren Village, and I sat on my thumbs praying and hoping that I could get in immediately, because when you're getting evicted, you got to go somewhere. Nobody cares about your stuff being put out. You ride along the street and you see people's stuff out all the time. You don't stop from going to work to say, how can I help those people? What happened? When you look at people, we think homelessness looks like the guy on the corner. We don't think it looks like business people with degrees. Warren Village called me back, and I'm telling you, I think everybody that knows me knew I was just joy and in awe. you could move in 30 days. You're like, yes. It's a clean, safe place. My kids can come. I can rebuild. I can get back on track. I could do. What I didn't realize is that this trauma froze me. It hospitalized me. Because how do you deal with it? You attack it head on, right? You say, hey, the baby needs help. I'm going to help it. And I'm going to do this. I'm going to take him. I'm going to do this. And I'm going to cook and clean. It's something like the Superman cape thing that women carry sometimes. But you feel like you could do it all until I was hospitalized. And he was like, hey, stop. Breathe. You're in a safe place now. You can eat now. It's warm. The door's locked. It's your key. We'll help you get back to where you are. I often think, where would I be without that help? Because I didn't grow up thinking I was going to be homeless. I didn't grow up thinking, what do you do when you become homeless? I grew up thinking I was worthy. I can empower other people. And now it is my mission. Thank you so much for listening.
Homelessness can happen to anyone. No one's immune. It only takes a few missteps. I was a news producer for over 12 years. I've made great money. I owned my own home. There were so many things going right with my life. And then I married a man who was emotionally abusive. He was drinking heavily. He was using marijuana. And our marriage had deteriorated to the point where it just fell completely apart. I came to experience homelessness when my husband kicked my daughters and I out 2 weeks before Christmas in 2012 on my daughter's 8th birthday. When you experience something like that, it's like somebody has just punched you in the gut. You can't think. You can't focus. You don't know what you're going to do. But we were fortunate enough to secure transitional housing in February, late February, early March 2013. I think everyone deserves a safe place to call home. I think everyone deserves to be safe. And to look down on people because they're in transition doesn't do them any good. We're in transition. That means that we're no longer where we used to be. We're moving forward. I graduated in May with my master's degree. My daughters are doing very well. My oldest daughter is an honor student, and so is my youngest daughter. But it takes time. It takes time to rebuild people and to help them understand that they are worthy. And my daughters and I are going to be just fine.
These are the faces of homelessness. These are the stories that you'll not read in our local newspapers, that you generally will not see on the television, and yet they represent the majority of those who are homeless here in Denver and here in Colorado. Now the challenge, because I said I was going to ask you for some change. So on your table is a pledge card. And this is not a monetary commitment of any sort. But do know that to make change in our country, you have to have your voice heard. And if the stories that you heard today are important to you, if they're relevant to you, if you feel like you have a voice, because you do, the way to connect to the best information in regard to homelessness here in Colorado will be through the Close to Home campaign. If you fill out this card, Close to Home will send you emails, not soliciting, but rather to share information. You can opt out at any time. Can you tell I get a lot of emails? So you can opt out at any time and know that you'll be getting the most accurate facts to make decisions around in regard to homelessness through the Close to Home campaign. So here's the pledge card. Please take the pledge today. Once you take the pledge, just leave it at your table. We'll collect them later on. And I'd like to welcome back up our 3 incredible speakers. Please come up.